What if I asked you something you avoid admitting, even to yourself? How many people would actually notice if, starting tomorrow, you simply stopped existing? 3, 2, or none at all? How many times have you been overly helpful and barely acknowledged? How many times have people mistaken your kindness for endless availability? How many times have you swallowed your own voice because you knew no one cared enough to listen? It was exactly that kind of question, raw, cruel, impossible to dodge, that crushed William Hart that morning in Ridgewell. He didn't wake up sad. He woke up clear-headed, clear enough to finally see the truth he'd been avoiding for years. In that small town, surrounded by dry hills and white fences, he was nothing more than a smudged reflection in the corner of everyone's vision. He was still sitting on the edge of his bed when the full weight of that realization hit him at once. The alarm went off, same as always, but the feeling that washed over him was different, like he'd lost something he didn't remember dropping. Ridgewell woke with its usual routines, old pickup trucks coughing through their first starts, dogs barking in the distance, the smell of brewed coffee hanging in stuffy kitchens. But to William, it all felt like an empty replay, a stage play where he was the permanent extra. He put on his denim jacket, wrinkled at the elbows, and stepped outside. The cold air hit him like a warning. Main Street was already busy, the butcher unlocking his shop, the grocery store lifting its metal shutters, old Mrs. Maggie waving at everyone passing by. She waved at William too, but the kind of wave you give a street light that's always been there, a reflex, not a choice. With every step, he noticed things he used to overlook, the automatic greetings, the conversations he was never invited to stay for, the decisions made without anyone even thinking to ask for his opinion. And he was always there, always available, always the first to help and the last to be remembered. "Hey, William, morning," said Greg Thompson, owner of the auto shop. "Morning," he replied. But Thompson had already turned his back before the answer even landed. William felt that familiar micro-humiliation, tiny needles that together pierced the soul. That day there would be a community meeting at the church to discuss the irrigation system that supplied the local ranches. It mattered. The whole town depended on it. William showed up to every meeting, always willing to help, always trying to contribute. When he arrived, the chairs were arranged in a semicircle, the smell of old wood heavy in the air. People gathered, talked among themselves, laughed in small clusters. He walked in. No one noticed. He headed to his usual spot, the corner. Never on purpose, but that was always where the empty seat ended up. Pastor Collins opened the meeting. Firm voice, heavy presence. "Folks, we need to sort out the irrigation issue before next month." Everyone chimed in, talking over each other, eager to be heard. William had a simple, efficient suggestion, something that would fix the problem without anyone spending more than necessary. He raised his hand. No one saw it. He leaned forward a bit. Nothing. When he finally tried speaking without waiting to be called on, Collins had already given the floor to someone else. "We could add an auxiliary pump," he suggested, his voice almost too soft. "Huh?" Collins muttered, glancing to his right, assuming someone else had spoken. But someone interrupted. Another person talked louder. Another dominant idea took over. And William pulled back, like he always did. It was impossible to tell if it was rejection or pure indifference, as if the town had collectively built a habit of not noticing him. It wasn't hostility. It was worse. indifference. When the meeting ended, people left in groups, chatting on their way out. William walked alone down the sidewalk, the sun setting behind the hills, and that's when he saw him, Ethan Alden, the Air Force veteran, standing in the shadow of the hardware store. Ethan was known by everyone in Ridgewell for his discipline, for the look in his eyes, the kind you only get after seeing things no one around there could ever imagine, for the involuntary respect his presence commanded. He didn't demand authority, he radiated it. And it was that man who stared at William with a strange expression. It wasn't judgment, it wasn't pity, it was assessment, a silent evaluation, as if he were measuring something in him he couldn't see himself. William tried to smile. "Evening, Mr. Alden." The veteran answered with just a small nod, but his eyes didn't move away. They followed William, as if searching for a crack, a hollow space, a blind spot he couldn't see himself. A shiver ran through William, not fear, but exposure. He kept walking, but the feeling stayed. Ethan had seen something in him that no one else in town had ever seen, something William might not have had the courage to face. Night fell. The street lights flickered on with their tired yellow glow. William was heading home when he heard footsteps behind him. Not light ones, firm ones, steady ones. He recognized the sound before he even turned. "Hart?" Ethan called, with a voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. William stopped. "Yes?" The veteran studied him for a few seconds, as if choosing the exact moment to speak a truth that would cut deep. "You walk like someone who's apologizing for existing." William opened his mouth, but no words came out. Ethan continued, "And the world doesn't respect anyone who asks for permission to take up space." Then he turned and walked away, leaving William standing there, defeated and awake at the same time. In that moment, a devastating question took hold in his mind, stronger than all the others. How much of his life had he lost simply because he never learned how to show up? And for the first time, the answer finally mattered.
Ethan was never a man of long speeches. When he talked, his words sounded like they'd been sharpened beforehand, meant to cut clean and leave no room for excuses. That night, after watching William walk with that defeated posture and that hollow look, he didn't offer comfort. Comfort was for people who wanted to stay the same. "Walk with me." They headed toward the trail along the hills. The moon stretched shadows across the dirt, and the dry wind carried the uneasy feeling that something inside William was about to be stripped away, or finally built. Ethan wasn't interested in confessions. He wanted discipline. "Earlier, you said maybe the problem was you," Ethan said, eyes fixed on the path ahead. "Good. Let's break that open." William almost answered, but something in Ethan's tone made silence feel like the only correct response. Words would have weakened the moment. There are 5 forces that give a man weight: posture, calm, eyes, deep listening, intentional silence. Easy to understand, almost impossible to practice. The first force was posture. Ethan stood William facing the hill and adjusted him piece by piece, chin lifted, breath down into the ribcage, feet claiming the ground like it belonged to him. It wasn't about looking confident, it was about standing in the world as someone who refuses to shrink. "Posture isn't theater," Ethan said, nudging his shoulder into alignment. "It's how you let the world push against you. Open shoulders aren't arrogance, they're readiness." At first, William felt ridiculous, like a fraud playing strong while the world already knew he wasn't. But slowly, the mechanical adjustments turned into something internal. Straightening his spine wasn't a pose, it was a decision. The second force was calm, and Ethan trained it through discomfort. Sudden noises, interruptions, small provocations from a local kid who owed Ethan a favor. Every stimulus demanded that William stay centered, breathe, resist the pull to react. Nervousness is surrender. Lose your calm and you hand the steering wheel to the first fool who makes noise. William kept slipping into old patterns, over-explaining, apologizing, trying to smooth the room with softness that no one respected. But repetition began carving through those impulses. He listened before speaking, he spoke less but with direction. His mind learned to wait a breath before responding. The third and fourth forces came together, eyes and deep listening. Ethan dragged him through cafes, grocery lines, post office counters. William had to meet people's eyes, not with aggression, not with submissiveness, but with presence. He discovered that eye contact wasn't dominance, it was acknowledgement. A quiet way of saying, "I'm here." Deep listening is a form of authority, Ethan said. When someone feels heard, they instinctively lean in to hear you back. They practiced holding eye contact long enough to make someone feel seen, not trapped. And they practiced the silence after someone finishes speaking, the silence that forces them to continue to reveal what they didn't plan to say. William noticed something surprising. When he truly listened, people didn't just talk more, they returned their attention to him as if drawn by gravity. The fifth force was the hardest: intentional silence. Silence isn't absence, Ethan said. It's territory. It forces people to fill the space with truth, with mistakes, with what they really think. William realized how often he spoke just to avoid discomfort, to manage other people's perception, to prove he wasn't a threat. But silence, chosen silence, gave his words weight. It made people lean in, not away. The training never stayed theoretical. Ethan pushed him into small leadership moments, mediating a discussion at church, coordinating a minor barn repair, stepping in for someone who missed a local meeting. William stumbled through the early attempts. His voice thinned out, his shoulders collapsed, his instinct to disappear snapped back like a rubber band. You abandon yourself before you begin. That's habit. We replace habits. Ridgewell resisted the change. The town didn't appreciate sudden evolution. Side glances, quiet laughs, little comments in aisles and parking lots. The price of becoming visible. But progress was shaping William anyway. Slow, abrasive, like stone being carved by weather. He became less desperate to be liked, more committed to inhabiting himself fully. Presence, he learned, wasn't a talent, it was ritual. Posture at dawn, breath before speech, direct eyes, deep listening. Silence chosen with intent, not fear. Ethan rarely praised him. When he did, it sounded almost accidental. You're becoming harder to ignore. By late winter came the real test. A resource allocation proposal William would present to the Community Garden Committee. A trial quietly arranged by Ethan and a few allies who believed the town needed to see what William had become. William prepared everything, not just the content, but the posture, the pacing, the pauses. When he stood before the room, people actually stopped talking, not out of politeness, out of curiosity. He spoke without rushing, without shrinking, without asking permission to exist. When he finished, the proposal passed easily. On the walk home, papers in hand, William looked up at the sky and felt something he hadn't felt in years, a calm born from owning the moment. Ethan waited for him near the road, silent as a shadow. He didn't smile, he never smiled, but there was acknowledgement in the way he scanned him from head to toe, as if confirming the results. This wasn't about turning you into someone else, Ethan said. It's about giving you weight. They kept walking. The next test would be public, a full town meeting, no safe environment, no warm-up. Ethan stopped, turned to him. Are you ready? William breathed once, felt the ground claim him back, and, for the first time, believed his own answer. Yes, I am.
The night of the town hall meeting arrived with a cold that felt like it came from deep inside the earth. The kind of cold that doesn't ask for jackets, it asks for courage. Ridgewell was divided, more than at any time anyone could remember. The project that aimed to carve out part of the hills to make room for a mining company had split the town in half, promised jobs on one side, destruction of the landscape on the other. The meeting would be decisive. The community hall, usually thick with the smell of damp wood, was packed. Entire families, farmers, shop owners, and the simply curious. The voices blended into a restless buzz, like angry bees trapped inside a metal bucket. William arrived early, not to arrange chairs. For the first time in months, he refused that automatic gesture of usefulness. He sat in the middle of the room, in a visible, strategic spot. He felt the looks, some curious, others suspicious, but he didn't look away. Ethan walked in a few minutes later, discreet, but carrying that ancient rock presence of his. He gave William the smallest nod, a nod that meant, "I'm here, but you're the one stepping onto the field." The meeting began with arguments that escalated far too fast. Men raised their voices over one another. Women, irritated, tried to restore order. There were shouting matches, interruptions, small verbal jabs tearing through the air. The council table looked completely unable to control the crowd. 30 minutes in, Ridgewell no longer felt like a town. It felt like an open wound. William watched it all without moving a muscle. His training echoed in his posture, shoulders solid, chin steady, breath measured. The tension was violent, but his calm felt even more solid in contrast. An elderly woman, trembling, dropped her papers while trying to speak. A farmer cut her off with impatience. Another man, more agitated, accused the council of manipulation. Someone slammed a hand on the table. Pure chaos. And right in the middle of that storm, Ethan shot William a short look. Just a second. No words, no command. But the look was a door opening, and William understood. 1. The moment that decides everything. He stood up slowly. Not out of anger, not in a hurry. He rose like someone stepping into a role, not like someone asking for permission. The quiet movement drew the attention of those closest to him first, then the rest. He didn't justify himself, didn't clear his throat, didn't ask to speak. He simply stood. The room didn't fall silent immediately, but it hesitated. A tiny, nearly invisible hesitation, like when the wind shifts direction without warning. The hesitation grew, spreading like a silent wave until even the loudest voices looked at him with discomfort and curiosity. But William didn't look away. He waited. Intentional silence, the fifth force, the softest and most devastating strike. The room, which minutes earlier seemed ready to explode, began to deflate. The noise dropped not out of obedience, but instinct, like animals sensing an unexpected presence entering the space. Seizing the moment, William drew a deep breath and said one single sentence. "You're about to destroy Ridgewell with your own hands, and you haven't even noticed." It was like shattering glass. His voice was steady, low, no trembling, no excuses. The sentence hit the room with a weight no one expected from William Hart. William the chair setter, William the door holder, William who always waited his turn and never had one. Now he was the center of the room. 2. The voice that finally gets heard. He went on. "This isn't just about the project dividing the town. We're doing that ourselves, and that's more dangerous than any machine that company can bring." He paused. Intentional silence. 2 people shifted in their seats, uneasy. He held their gaze, firm, not aggressive, but unmistakably present. The council at the front froze. It was as if the entire room was waiting for the moment he'd stumble, but he didn't. For the first time, William wasn't trying to be helpful. For the first time, he was necessary. He opened the report he'd brought, but didn't look at the pages. I did the math. Yes, the project may bring jobs, but the company doesn't guarantee they'll stay, doesn't guarantee compensation for the damaged areas. The risk is bigger than anyone here is admitting because you're all too busy fighting. A murmur followed, not disagreement, recognition. William breathed in. And if there's a real solution, it won't come from the loudest side. It'll come from the sanest one. And sanity doesn't live in shouting. It lives in presence. A rougher farmer, known for dismissing any idea that wasn't his, crossed his arms and said, "And what makes you think you know what you're talking about, William?" The question was a test, an invitation for the old William to return, but he didn't. William held the man's gaze. No rush, no challenge, just presence. No one has to take my word for it. That's why I'm suggesting we look at this together. No yelling, no hurry, no turning neighbors into enemies. The farmer lowered his shoulders. It was the quietest surrender Ridgewell had ever seen. From that moment on, something shifted in the air. People began to listen. The council regained control, but didn't impose, it guided. And every time the discussion started to derail, all William had to do was straighten his posture or fall into silence, and the room recalibrated. Not because he was forceful, but because he was truly there. The debate ended not with unanimity, but with clarity. The town would conduct a second analysis of the project with real community involvement, deeper studies, and signed guarantees. The final decision would be made 3 weeks later. When the session ended, no one rushed to the doors. People stayed. They approached William. They talked to him. They asked questions. They considered what he said, not as a helper, but as an authority. Ethan watched from the back, discreet, with the look of someone seeing exactly what he always knew would happen. William walked up to him. "You already knew this would happen?" he asked. Ethan gave a half smile. "I knew you had everything you needed. You just had to stop running from yourself." They walked together out into the street. The wind blew softer now, as if Ridgewell itself was finally breathing again. "So, is it over?" William asked. Ethan shook his head. "Nothing's ever over. But today you stepped into the place that was always yours. From here on out, you don't need me." William stayed quiet. Not the old, shrinking quiet, the new one, the kind that opens space. Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. The world changes when you change the way you take up space in it. And with that, the veteran turned and headed down the dark street. No speech, no final lesson. He simply left space, the exact amount for William to fill with his own presence. Ridgewell noticed that too. From that night forward, no one would ever bump into William Hart without realizing he was there. Because he finally was.